Take a moment to relax. Let the muscles in your neck and back loosen up. Feel the warmth come into your hands. Take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Feel yourself sink into your chair deeply. Now, think about something that makes you come alive, really mentally engaged, joyful. When you pursue this, are you talking or quiet? Are you engaged with a group or acting alone? Are you creating or appreciating? Are you moving or still? When you're no longer engaged in that activity, how do you feel? Happy, relaxed, energized, appreciative? How can you integrate this into your day, into you? Can you seek to appreciate all the positives? Can you value that those positives are you? Take a breath. Be aware of your full self. As we come back into this room, we're going to light candles. And I would invite you, if you choose to light a candle, maybe lift a thought of appreciation for yourself and the positive light you bring to the world, the way you make the world come alive.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. Babies cry, I watch them grow. They learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. What a wonderful world. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
So last week, if you were with us or you joined us online, we talked about how we as humans, we have so much potential, so much to give inside of us. It's a lot of what the video mentioned. And yet something that we get stuck in is we often can see it more in other people than we can see it in ourselves. It's often easier to project our own best qualities outside of ourselves than to be able to see it on the inside. And so we, using this metaphor of inner gold, we talked about how sometimes other people hold our gold, and it's important for us to reclaim our gold, reclaim kind of our true self. And so if you want to engage in this ritual that we did last week, towards the end, when we're doing our discussion times, you feel free to come up. And basically, I invited people to write down what is that part of themselves that they've been able to see in others, but not really been able to see in themselves. And it's time for them to reclaim that back. And so if you want to come up towards the end of service and write that down and grab a piece of gold, then I would invite you to do that if you weren't able to last week. But I do want to just read a couple of the examples because I thought what you had to say was so beautiful. Again, remember, these are the qualities, these are the aspects of ourselves that we spent maybe our whole life having a hard time internalizing these things, but it's time for us to see them in ourselves. I am releasing all the inadequacies that I felt as a mother. My children are all in service to others. That was my gift of gold, to myself and to them. Change maker. Needing others to be proud of me, to feel successful. Moving and creating a new life by being my most authentic self. Never believing in myself enough to become the person I envision myself being. I am pure love. So I hope that was a meaningful way to kind of embody that idea last week. And this week, we're going to kind of tag on to that, but we're going to kind of go into a little bit of new territory. This video that we played at the beginning of service was an excerpt from an author whose name is Charles Eisenstein. And he has this really great book where he kind of explores some of these ideas. But I know we're all so busy and, you may not have time to read the full book. But I promise you, just the title, it'll feel like you've done some reading just by hearing the title. The title is The More Beautiful World That Our Hearts Know Is Possible. It's a bit of a mouthful. But I really love some of the ideas in this book. And he explored some of these ideas in the video. Really, the book talks about how we are in a time of transition in the world. And really, it's a transition between two competing stories. There's this old story that our society has been built off of and really been stuck in for many years. He calls it the myth of separation. Really, it's a story, it's a narrative that we are separate from nature, we are separate from each other, and everything is quantifiable. And this is the story that's really built a lot of our systems that are extracting all the life out of our world. They're built. This is what's built the systems that have created such, unbelievable wealth inequalities. And yet he talks about how we're trying to bring about this more beautiful world, which operates off of a new story. And yet it's not only a new story; it's also an ancient story, because it's a story that so many indigenous peoples have already understood, so many ancient wisdom traditions have already understood, and yet it's new because in some ways we still need to fully embody it as a world. And he calls it the story of interbeing, interconnection, where we understand our connection with one another. We understand our connection with the planet and with nature, and we also understand that there is a great mystery that surrounds it all. And when he talks about this transition, he encourages us to remember that when we're trying to bring about this new story, it's important to do so avoiding some of the traps of the old mindset, of the old story. He says it like this: I'd like to suggest that anything that violates or disrupts the story of separation will heal any and all of the consequences of that story. This includes even the tiny, invisible actions that our rational mind, steeped in the logic of separation, says cannot possibly make a difference. It includes the kind of actions that get squeezed out by the big crusades to save the world. And he goes on later in the book to say, we and the earth are one. As above, so below. What we do to each other, even to the smallest animal or plant, we do to all creation. Perhaps all our small, invisible acts imprint themselves upon the world in ways we do not understand. See, this series has been called The Village, and it's really about what kind of community do we want to be? And really, I believe that our community has taken on this charge of embodying a new way of operating, a new way of being in the world. And we're a community that values and cherishes even the small, invisible acts of love. And yet sometimes, I know it's true for me, and I'm sure it's true for you, we often feel like the things that we do, the things that are making us come alive, the things that are closest to our heart, we still have this voice in the back of our head that says, it's not enough. It's too small. You need to be doing more. You need to be doing something different. And so this series has really been asking this question: does what I do actually matter? Does this community really matter? And I believe wholeheartedly the answer is a resounding yes. But as we finish this series, we need to kind of adopt a new mindset and look at some new ideas to answer this question in a new way. There's a concept that most often comes up around the conversation of sustainability and environmentalism, because really this is one of the greatest, issues as far as magnitude that we face as a society, as a world. This concept is called the tragedy of the commons. And it's basically this idea where you or I might be inspired to do something, to help the problem, to alleviate an issue. But then this other voice comes in and says, that thing you're going to do is so small and it's not even going to make a dent within the larger issue. The one thing that you feel called to do, well, there's 10, 100, 1,000 people out there doing the opposite. So why even bother? It's just a drop in a bucket. You see some trash on the side of the road and you feel compelled to pick it up. And then instantly this other voice comes in and says, later today there's going to be 5 more pieces of trash where that came from. And so what do? Well, often nothing. And I think this is really the tragedy, is that we become overwhelmed. And so we are frozen. We're left to inaction. There's a wash next to our house, and we're so fortunate and grateful for this wash because our dog is still a puppy and she requires so much attention and a lot of activity. And so we've decided we need to take her on 2 walks a day, and it's lovely to have this wash because it's a really beautiful place to walk her. And at the end of this wash, there is this really beautiful open clearing. And yet, when we first started walking Josie, we realized that if you look closely in this beautiful open clearing and you look down at the ground, that there is so much poop. Just so much. And not just a lot of poop, but every kind of poop things, shapes, sizes, textures that I've never seen or imagined before. It feels as though every creature of the Sonoran Desert Basin comes to this one spot to do its business. And the horse poop is there, and and then you look and you kind of go, well, if the horse people aren't picking up their stuff, and so, then the dog people, and it becomes this cycle. And sometimes Olivia will say, I just want to go in there and pick up some poop. And I'm like, I get it. It's such a good impulse, but we know there's going to be just a million more pieces where that came from tomorrow. This is the tragedy of the commons, Olivia calls it the poo mine. And I asked her, why do you call it that? And she said, well, it's where all the gold nuggets are. So different kind of gold than that. But this is the tragedy of the commons. Well, what's the point? Because it's not going to do anything, right? Ironically, when I was preparing for this message this week, for the first time ever, Josie actually decided to go there in the poo mine. And just because of the nature of this message, I just thought, I have to, who am I if I didn't, But really, I think the tragedy of the commons is a tragedy of overwhelm. Brene Brown talks about it like this. Overwhelm means an extreme level of stress and emotional or cognitive intensity to the point of feeling unable to function. The big difference is we can function in stress, but we can't really function in overwhelm. Now, I'm not saying that when we walk down this poo mine that I'm unable to function or anything, but really, this is an idea that I know I can relate to, that there's a point that we reach where there's just too much information, there's too many obstacles, and it just feels like we shut down on some level. You know that difference between those days where you feel really accomplished? And yeah, you have a lot of tasks or you have a lot of responsibilities coming at you, but you're just like, keep knocking them out of the park, one by one, throw them at me, I got this, Those are great days. But then there are also those other days where it just feels like it's all coming at me too fast. I can't do it. I just cannot do it. And you kind of shut down. It's like, do you remember that game Whack-A-Mole? Where like in the beginning, you're like, I got this. And then too many start coming out and you're like, there's too many. I can't do this. That's overwhelm. And I think it's true of our world. Think about how we take in information. Think about all the news, all the information that's coming at us so fast at any given moment. It makes sense why we get overwhelmed. Our brains really are not developed for the level and speed in which we have all this information coming at us. And I think what overwhelm is it's really us looking at the whole problem instead of the thing that's right in front of us. The one step, the one thing that you and I can do, the thing that we are being called to do. Instead, we see everything. We see the full magnitude of the problem, and it paralyzes us. I know for me, something that I get stuck in, especially when taking on projects, is rather than just focusing on step 1 and step 2 and step 3, I immediately go to step 100. For example, sometimes I'll be like, it would be really fun to write a book. And then I immediately go, well, you're going to need a publisher and an agent. And, if you want to get on the bestseller list, then you probably need to put this book out in the next 2 years, but it's going to take about 2 years writing it. And then you're going to need like another year to sell it to the publisher and all that. And then I think, well, by that point, someone else is going to come up with the same idea. And so I just don't even do it, But like, how often do we do that? If you're creative and you have these ideas and then instantly you go to How is it going to be received? And it's like, no, we get so disconnected to the process, the love of just doing something for the sake of doing it, for the value of what it does for us. Just this past month in February, it was Black History Month. And when we look at the civil rights movement, we see an amazing example of a group of people who took on an overwhelming problem, but instead of fighting fire with fire, instead of approaching that problem with the same mindset that built the problem, instead of approaching the story of separation with more separation, they approach the story of separation with a story of interbeing. The Black feminist, queer, civil rights icon Audre Lorde said it this way: "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." In other words, the tools that built this system are not the tools that are going to help create a better system. It makes me think of that old saying, an eye for an eye just leaves the whole world blind. So what are the tools? Well, so often it's the opposite, right? It's the complete opposite way of thinking. When I think of Jesus, I think of a way of being that in so many ways was the opposite idea of what was cultural at the time. Jesus was very countercultural, and in many ways, when people talk about the way of Christ, they call it the upside down kingdom, because in a way he flipped everything. He said, the last shall be first, the poor and the meek shall inherit the earth. Turn the other cheek. And he answered empire with the cross, with the ultimate symbol of surrender and self-sacrifice. Martin Luther King said it this way: hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. There's an author named Tricia Hersey who just came out with a book called Rest is Resistance. And I love what she has to say. Loving ourselves and each other deepens our disruption of the dominant systems. They want us unwell, fearful, exhausted, and without deep self-love, because you are easier to manipulate when you are distracted by what is not real or true. She also has a social media account called The Nap Ministry, and she basically is like, look, just take a nap. Like, the world wants you to keep going, just take a nap. I took a nap yesterday. I haven't taken a nap in a long time, and usually on Saturdays I'm like, I want to go out and explore. It's the festival of books. I got to go out and do stuff. And I took a nap yesterday, and honestly, just got to say, try it sometime. Naps are great. They are resistance. Or I love the way that illustrator Scott Erickson puts it. It has been said that evil never rests. So I practice resting, that I would become the opposite of evil. Think about how this applies to our own personal lives, our own internal worlds. I think, just as one example, I think about anxiety. And I think how so often we try to fight anxiety with more anxiety. We don't realize this, but a lot of times when we're bogged down with anxiety, what we're really doing is we're anxious because we're feeling anxious. We're like, I shouldn't be feeling this. I'm way beyond this. And so we start to have double anxiety. What if, as an experiment, we felt unanxious about our anxiety? What if we felt our anxiety come in and we felt pretty relaxed about it? We could just say, I see you, anxiety. That's fine. That's okay. In a way, the story of separation says, no, I shouldn't be feeling this. And the story of interbeing says, that's okay. You're a part of me too. I accept you. But you're not going to be in the driver's seat today, but it's okay. Thank you for being here. Imagine, instead of fighting fire with fire, we fight it with water. Or how does this work in our society? Like in practicality? Is this a real thing? Well, let's look at it like this. In the European Union, it is legally required that every employer gives, at the bare minimum, 20 days of vacation each year. And many countries in the European Union have upped that to 25. Do you know how many days are legally required for vacation in the U.S.? That's right. And yet, 9 out of 10 of the most productive countries in the world are in Europe. See, the old story says, well, they're doing less, they're at work less, so wouldn't that naturally equal less productivity? But the new story says their mental health, their own internal spark and creativity also matters. And actually, it contributes to their productivity. In December of 2022, a study group called 4 Day Week Global, which is a New Zealand-based nonprofit, released data taken from 33 participating companies that employed 969 people based in the US, Australia, Ireland, UK, New Zealand, and Canada, who all adopted a 4-day work week in a pilot program over a 6-month period. And these are what the findings were. The research found the shortened work week was a resounding success on virtually every dimension. Companies are extremely pleased with their performance, productivity, and overall experience, with almost all of them already committing or planning to continue the 4-day week schedule. The report said revenue has risen over the course of the trial. Sick days and absenteeism are down. Companies are hiring. Resignations fell slightly, a striking finding during the Great Resignation. Employees are similarly enthusiastic, and climate impacts, while less well measured, are also encouraging. So less literally can be more. Jesus was also about bringing a new story into a world where the dominant story, the story of separation, had become so powerful, had become so tied to empire that resisting this story meant death. And yet, he had a pretty clear vision about certain attributes of this new story. Matthew 13:31 and through 32 is a story that Jesus tells, a parable. He says it like this. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a sower took and planted in his field. Mustard seeds are minute, tiny, but the seeds grow into trees. Flocks of birds can come and build their nests in the branches. See, if you've ever seen a mustard seed, they are incredibly small. But they also spread and scatter quite easily, and they can take over a garden. What if every small act of love, every tiny invisible act where we transcend ourselves, where we find something deep within ourselves of love, of compassion, of empathy, what if every one of those small acts has the potential to grow into a tree? When I look at our community, I'm so excited for us to grow as a community, but even more than that, I'm excited for all of us as individuals to grow like mustard seeds. That you would thrive. That you would become who you were meant to be. That you would live a life of trust, surrender, joy. Because I know that you will grow into a tree, that you are already a tree. And we can't measure the impact of all these mustard seeds scattered about Tucson and scattered throughout the world. We can't measure that impact using the old model. So on some level, we have to trust and know that as we come into our fullest selves, it has an impact far greater than we can imagine. And that is one aspect of how I believe this community will grow. And yes, you might say, well, we are a relatively small group of people in just one city, in a big world. And it's true that there are a lot of organizations and even a lot of churches that are doing everything they can to hold up the old story. But I believe if we approach what's right in front of us with great love, the impact goes far beyond the old measuring stick. And as we've been talking about our pledge this month, it may have spurred a number of different thoughts in you. Maybe when we talk about the pledge, the first thought that comes to mind is, well, I can't really give much, and so I don't know what the point is. And I would just encourage you not to become overwhelmed by the great need, but instead to see your contribution, whatever it is, as a mustard seed that has the potential to grow. Whether it's $5 or $500 or $5,000, it matters. The truth about us as a community is we exist through giving. And if you were at our annual meeting a few months back, we let you know, based on COVID and the different transitions that this community has been through, we are currently in a deficit, and by definition, that is not sustainable forever. And this pledge isn't something that we're going to constantly be talking about and trying to put in front of you throughout the year. It's really something that we want to talk about at specific times to say, look, if you know at this moment what your contribution is going to be able to be throughout the year, and you can just let us know. And that way we've both kind of entered into this commitment with one another. And it's not a commitment that we're going to chase you down for, but it's just a commitment that you make to yourself and that we acknowledge and we are so grateful for. And I do want to let you know, too, this isn't something where it's, we're asking above and beyond what you were already planning to give. This is just a way for you to let us know what your intended giving would be for this year. And I do want to kind of just give you a sense of where we're at. We have $26,000 pledged. We have $113,000 remaining in our budget for the year. If this is intimidating to you, then there's a smiley face. But we just want to be really transparent with you and let you know where we're at, let you know how things are going, let you know how you can help, how you can be a mustard seed. And I just want to close with this. Mother Teresa said it this way: not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And I think really, when she talks about great things, I think she's talking about scope, because I think all of the big or small things are great. I think when you show small acts of love and kindness, no matter how small, they are great. But I think she's talking about, maybe we're not all going to have a platform of millions of people. We're not going to have millions of dollars to be able to spend this way or that. But we can all do what's right in front of us with great love. So with that, I want to turn it over to discussions. Here are the questions for today. Today we talked about the old story and the new story. How can we recognize the old story mindset when that voice comes in and says, well, it's too small. Well, that's not worth doing because it's not going to help. How do we recognize that mindset, and how can we rewrite it with the story of interbeing? And secondly, what are the mustard seeds in your life? The small things with great love that are right in front of you. All right, take these next 10 minutes and discuss.
I see trees of green.